When humanity expanded into the frontier outpost systems, the core tolerated it, at first. The core systems were ancient, luminous, and perfectly ordered, their trade routes mapped in flawless geometric precision, their economies optimized down to fractional efficiencies. Every species had a designated function. Every expansion was calculated. And humanity, being new, ambitious, and statistically unproven, was assigned to the margins. Officially, we were classified as auxiliary labor, frontier engineers, extraction specialists, adaptable workforce units. Unofficially, we were expendable. The core expected attrition. It expected supply failures, pirate losses, radiation casualties, slow collapses that would justify eventual reclamation. What it did not expect was growth. The first reports were small anomalies buried in quarterly summaries. Outpost Kepri exceeded mineral yield projections by 180%. Helium harvesters in the Vanta Expanse doubled output despite stellar flare instability. A human colony orbiting a fractured moon stabilized tectonic drift without requesting core engineering oversight. These were filed as statistical deviations. Humans were known for chaotic variance. But then the anomalies became patterns. Frontier settlements were not merely surviving, they were industrializing. They constructed modular shipyards from salvaged hulls. They built autonomous defense platforms using repurposed mining lasers. They refined radiation shielding techniques that reduced exposure mortality to near zero. More concerning to the core, they began manufacturing their own jump relays, shortening travel time between peripheral systems without requesting lane authorization. A minor silicon-based species from the outer Perseus drift filed a customs declaration that did not pass through the core exchange authority. Instead, it listed its trade partner as Freeport Meridian, human-operated. The declaration included raw crystal matrices exchanged for agricultural biopolymers and reactor components. No tariffs logged. No core mediator present. Within a cycle, 5 more minor species submitted similar declarations. Direct barter. Direct diplomacy. Direct transport. The core had never denied these species trade out of cruelty, it simply deemed them economically inefficient. Processing their integration would require infrastructure investment with low return margins. Humanity, however, saw opportunity where the core saw inconvenience. Freeport Meridian had begun as a refueling depot in a nebula-shadowed corridor. It evolved into a marketplace. Then into a neutral exchange hub. Docking rings expanded. Habitat modules multiplied. Shield arrays strengthened. Soon, ships of a dozen unaligned civilizations queued peacefully beneath its lights. Humans charged modest docking fees and asked only one condition: mutual respect. No species classification tiers. No audit prerequisites. No imposed quotas. The core interpreted this as regulatory defiance. An audit fleet was dispatched, 3 enforcement cruisers, compliance frigates, and a diplomatic envoy authorized to impose sanctions. They translated into the system expecting a lawless construction yard. Instead, they found order. Meridian rotated in quiet confidence, its hull layered in pragmatic plating, its traffic lanes precisely coordinated. Trade vessels moved with disciplined efficiency. Human patrol craft escorted incoming ships not with intimidation, but with structured protocol. When hailed, the station responded with formal identification codes and open transmission channels. The envoy docked. The decree was delivered: all frontier infrastructure fell under core jurisdiction, all trade agreements required authorization, all autonomous economic activity must cease pending review. The human representative listened without interruption. She stood in a chamber overlooking the nebula's electric glow, hands clasped behind her back, expression calm. When the envoy concluded, she asked a single question: under which clause does the core claim assets it did not fund, defend, or construct? The envoy cited expansion doctrine. The human activated a projection. The chamber filled with a star map, lines branching from Meridian to dozens of peripheral systems. Trade volumes. shared research initiatives, joint security pacts, agricultural exchanges preventing famine on 3 marginal worlds, reactor upgrades stabilizing 2 failing civilizations. These systems petitioned you for inclusion decades ago, she said. You declined. Insufficient projected value. We calculated differently. The envoy warned of isolation, sanctions, restricted access to core markets. The human smiled faintly. With respect, she replied, our markets are no longer centered on you. Additional data populated the projection. Human-built corridors now linked resource zones once considered unreachable. Frontier fleets, composed of mixed-species crews, patrolled shipping lanes cooperatively. Technology flowed laterally instead of vertically. No species was forced into a singular economic identity. Adaptability replaced assignment. Risk replaced stagnation. The core had pursued stability above all else. It minimized volatility, but it also minimized possibility. Humanity, accustomed to unstable climates, shifting borders, and economic upheaval even on its cradle world, did not fear volatility. It leveraged it. Nebula turbulence became cover for protected routes. Asteroid chaos became modular resource hubs. Minor species became partners instead of footnotes. The envoy returned to the fleet without firing a shot. Sanctions were drafted, but enforcement projections showed complications. Too many peripheral systems now depended on human corridors for critical imports. Disrupting Meridian would trigger cascading shortages far beyond the frontier. The core faced a dilemma it had not encountered in centuries, a network operating successfully outside its optimization models. Humanity had not declared war. It had not staged rebellion. It had simply built alternatives. And alternatives, the core realized, were more destabilizing than insurgency. Within cycles, additional frontier stations declared cooperative alignment with Meridian. Independent trade compacts formed. Shared research consortiums accelerated propulsion advancements beyond core patent restrictions. The frontier was no longer a scattering of labor camps. It was a lattice, resilient, adaptive, interconnected. The core could attempt force, but force would fracture trade stability. It could attempt negotiation, but negotiation required recognizing humanity as an equal economic power. For the first time in its meticulously ordered existence, the core confronted a species that thrived in uncertainty, that expanded without permission, that turned neglect into independence. Humanity had been sent to the margins to extract resources. It had been labeled auxiliary. It became central. And as new star maps circulated across the galaxy, one detail became impossible to ignore. The densest web of trade, innovation, and cooperative defense no longer radiated from the ancient luminous core. It radiated from the frontier, where humanity had been expected to fail, and instead chose to flourish.